All right, it is 4 o'clock on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. This is the Dartmouth Board of Health meeting. I'm going to move to open the meeting with a roll call. So Emily Michelle Olmsted, Chair, is present.
Richard Romero is present.
Excellent. I do not see our third member, Susan Murray. Chris, I'll just ask real quick. Have you heard anything from our third member if we believe that there may be a time conflict?
I have not.
Okay. Well, we'll proceed and hope that she is able to join us. As a reminder to everyone here, this meeting is being recorded. I just see, oh, excellent. Okay, I see our third member joining. Susan Murray, we just had a roll call to open the meeting. Can you please state your name and that you are present for the record?
Susan Murray, and I am present.
Thank you. And the meeting's being recorded. Okay, so it is 4:01, so we are going to move on to our agenda. So we are on section 1, appointments at 4:01. We've got phase 1 and 2, the environmental site assessment prepared for Kevin Medeiros for plat 163, lots 31, 32, and 35 on 802 to 808 State Road. And Chris, unless you wish to start with this, I'm going to ask if there is either an applicant or someone designated by the applicant here to speak on this project.
That would be great. Thank you. If you defer to the applicant first.
Sure. So if the applicant is here for this first item, which again is 802 to 808 State Road, please go ahead and speak now. I do not see anyone, and I'm not seeing any raised hands here. Chris, would you like to speak on this one? Because unless you believe one of the people in the waiting or here in the meeting is perhaps having technical difficulties and the name is connected with this site.
Sure, I can speak. I do not see any name that I would recognize associated with this project.
Okay, thank you.
I can give the board a brief description.
Thank you, that would be great.
So before the board with this agenda item is what's called an environmental site assessment. It's an assessment of the environmental conditions at the property on State Road that's listed in the agenda. The reason why the property's environmental conditions are being assessed is because of our local land development and reuse regulations. Those regulations require an environmental assessment of the soil and the groundwater in limited situations. More often than not, those limited situations is when there was a former industrial or non-residential use and that land is being converted to a high-risk use. High-risk use would be, for an example, turning a junkyard into a subdivision of residential homes. There are many other different applications, but to keep things brief, that's the best example. We also have another triggering requirement of the regulations, and that's when you have a vacant piece of land that is in proximity to a release site. And by a release site, what I mean is it's a defined term in Mass DEP's 310 MR 40 regulations. Those regulations define a release where oil or hazardous materials have been introduced into the environment. This site here is in proximity to several release sites, which triggers. Additionally, it's going to be a 50, I believe a 50 unit apartment building. So it's not just a single family home, it's going to be a high density land use. So they've done the environmental site assessment. In the past, when we end up with environmental site assessments before us for like a single family lot, most of the times those have been reviewed internally so as not to put a burden on a single family lot. In this case here, it's multifamily, and in prior keeping with the board decisions of the past, it's been referred out to a third-party reviewer. The third-party reviewer reviews the methodology of the ESA to make sure that it is complete. And that's it. We've used several different environmental firms. More recently, we have used Riverhawk Environmental. And if the board was inclined to require a third-party reviewer, I would recommend Riverhawk. They turned things around very quickly for us. And finally, the third-party reviewer, so the board is aware, it's set up with which is what's called a 53G account, whereas the applicant provides the town with the money. We put it into an account. At the end of the third-party reviewer's services to the board, any funds that are left over get returned to the applicant. And that is all.
Great. Richard Romero, I noticed that you had a comment about not being able to hear. Have you improved your situation, or do we need to?
Yes, I'm back on. I just caught the tail end of that Chris's conversation there from 53G account on. Unfortunately, anything prior to that I did not get.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, technology sometimes happens like that. Chris was kind enough to give us a summary on this one. Some of the notes that I wrote down, it's in proximity to several release sites. It's a multifamily residential, and previous boards of health often refer to a third party, and that Chris, as the health director, recommends Riverhawk because of their fast turnover. And then he mentioned the 53G account. Chris, would you say that's an adequate summary of what you said for Agent Romero?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just have one question for you, Chris. If we as a board so move to approve this with, do we need to specify that 53G account, or just that the third-party reviewer has to be paid for by the applicant?
For clarity, I would ask that you just put the 53G in any motion, if so inclined.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to questions and comments from my fellow board members first. So Richard Romero, I'll start with you. Do you have any questions or comments?
I do not have any questions or comments at the moment.
Thank you. Okay, Susan Murray, do you have any questions or comments?
I just want to clarify from Chris, what is the benefit of getting a third-party reviewer versus the environmental site assessments that have been presented to us?
So let me just try to rephrase that, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. What is the benefit to having the third-party reviewer check what has been provided to us? Is that the question?
Well, I guess I didn't understand. I missed that part, that the third-party reviewer is checking the work of that has been presented to us.
Yeah. So let me try this. How about are you looking for me to describe the functionality of what the third-party reviewer will be doing for the board?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in our regs, it says that an ESA has to be conducted as provided in ASTM phase 1 and 2 or MCP phase 1. Those I'm really kind of consolidating. Those are it's a very brief description of a very detailed procedure. So it's just making sure that the procedures were followed to adequately characterize the parcel against risks from the nearby release site.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Then they're not redoing any testing. So they're not going to be going out there taking soil samples, taking groundwater samples. They're just reviewing to make sure that what the sampling that they did was sufficient to the standards.
Great. Okay. And then as far as discussion goes, and Susan Murray, did you have any other questions or comments?
No, that was my only question.
Thank you. I guess so. So for discussion between us, you know, I think it makes sense, in my opinion, to follow the suggestion to have that third party reviewer. I know as a Board of Health member, when I look over it, even though you know I'm in the sciences and I understand a fair amount about water testing, looking at that, it certainly would give me more confidence to have someone who is even more in depth in this field to look it over and make sure that everything aligns. So I'm in favor of following the motion to approve the third party reviewer. Is there any other discussion points anyone else wants to talk about before we make a motion? Okay. So I have a motion and a finding unless someone prefers to do it.
You can start at my notes all over the place. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right, so finding that this site is in proximity to several release sites and that for most multifamily residentials, it's been a board procedure to refer this to a third party, and finding that the health director specifically recommends, excuse me, Riverhawk Environmental LLC for its appropriate turnaround time. I move to require a third party reviewer with costs paid for by the applicant specifically to the 53G account, and that the third party reviewer is Riverhawk Environmental LLC. Can I get a second?
I second.
All right, and now we'll vote. So Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Susan Murray, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes. So motion passes. Okay, so we are going to now move on to the second item in section 1 appointments at 402, a little bit late, which is Darren Michaelis. I apologize if I said it wrong. Plat 79, lot 16 at 161 Pine Island Road, which is a waiver from 310 CMR 15 and the Dartmouth supplemental regulations. So again, Chris, jump in if you prefer, but right now I'm going to defer and ask if there is either the applicant or a representative of the applicant here to speak on this item.
Darren Michaelis from Foresight Engineering.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep, so I'm here on behalf of the Tripp family who hired me to do a Title V inspection. Unfortunately, the D-box was clogged with roots as well as the existing septic system. So we're proposing a remove and replace in the exact same area. We're going to take down a couple of the trees that we believe the roots are coming in from and put in a 40 mil liner to protect it from the large tree on the cemetery property. The liner will come from the bottom of excavation right to the surface almost to stop those roots. Same setbacks to the well. The existing well, unfortunately, is dead center of the property, so we can't get 100 feet anywhere. So we're asking for a waiver to 65, just to give the contractor a little bit of leeway to get away from those roots.
Great. Thank you. Chris, would you like to say anything on this item?
Sure, thank you. So this is a remove and replace in the existing area. It's unfortunate what happened with the roots because I think the roots were I'll go out on a limb and say that the roots were the sole culprit in the failure of this system. If the roots hadn't intruded into there, I see no reason why it would have failed. You know, it appeared that it was being maintained properly and the water usage was very, very low. So as far as the location of it, I don't see any alternatives except, an extraordinary expense would be drilling a new well. I would, throw a guess range out, a guesstimate on a new well installation, probably in the 15 to 25, probably 17.5 to 25 range. I think that would probably be pretty even with what is being proposed here. And I know that cost is supposed to be a consideration with maximum feasible compliance. I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to speak to the members, let the members ask any questions first, and then we'll see if there's anyone here to speak on this property. So I'll just ask Chris first. So I am nervous about the well. Has the board ever, or would it be an appropriate action to require a drinking water test? Just to, I guess, in case there's any sort of, infiltration from the septic system because of that, reduced setback?
If I can interrupt, we are getting a portability test, the owners.
are.
getting one. So I requested it
Excellent.
as part of the Title V inspection. So there will be a Title V portability. So we'll make sure that before the COC is issued, we have a passing well test. And then if there's any issues, we'll come back and address them.
Great. And you'll be going by drinking water regulations, I assume,
Correct.
with nitrogen and bacteria?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, I believe that answers my question. Chris, did you have anything to add?
I do not. It just, if the board, it's great that, Darren has, offered that, and advised that it sounds like, it's something that's already been discussed and somewhat in process. I would just ask that the board, if that's something that the board wants to see, sometimes things can go sideways between applicants and homeowners, and next thing you know, you got a new person coming in the 11th hour. So if the board wants to require that as part of a condition, the board would be within its right to insert that with the approval of the waiver request.
Great. Thank you. Those are the questions and comments I have for now. I'll open up to my other members. Richard Romero, do you have questions or comments?
On the agenda, it lists 68 feet. Mr. Michaelis mentioned 65 feet. Is
Yeah,
that a
so
big
it's
difference?
shown as 68 on my plan, but we all know that contractors can't be exact to the exact foot sometimes, and we're trying to really get away from that big tree on the cemetery land. We don't want to undercut those roots too much and end up killing the tree. So that's why I gave the contractor another couple feet, just some wiggle room for him.
Okay, so it's 65 feet.
Yeah, would be the minimum, correct.
That's all I have.
All right, and Susan Murray, questions, comments?
I do not have any questions or comments.
Excellent. All right, I'm just gonna poke through here and make sure if there's any abutters or anyone else here to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Okay. All right, seeing none. Is there any further discussion we need from further members? Otherwise, again, I also have a tentative finding, motion, and condition written if folks are comfortable with me going forward with it. Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, what did you say?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I forgot I was on.
Okay, so finding that this is a remove and replace situation, that the well is pretty centered on the lot and it's not really possible to achieve greater setback or alternatives, and that the system failed because of tree roots. I move to approve the plan for Plat 79, Lot 16 at 161 Pine Island Road with the following condition: that a well water analysis be submitted and must show adherence to standard potability levels for nitrogen and bacteria, and that be submitted to the Board of Health agents. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All right, now we'll vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes, so the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Good
All right, we're going to go on to section 2, which is new business. We'll go on to item A, S&K Engineering LLC Plat 74 5-20 at 1 Knollview Drive. Okay, bear with me. I have a couple screens here, so I'm jumping back and forth. Again, Chris interrupts, but I'll go to the applicant or representative of the applicant first. Is someone here to speak on this item? I do not see anyone. Chris, can you give us a summary on this, please?
Sure. So this is we do not have any waivers or variances associated with this application for the construction of a new septic system for the existing home at 1 Knollwood Drive. The reason why this is before the board is because there's a little bit of uncertainty that requires further excavation, and it's really not, enormous uncertainty, but I would like the board to condition the approval of this require the engineer to determine the elevations of the existing septic, the building sewer and existing septic tank prior to any work being done. The reason why I ask this is because if things are substantially different, it could end up with the tank having to need another waiver. There are limitations as to how deep a tank can go. So right now, everything works with what he is, hoping, but he is clearly inserted that there's a lot of uncertainty and that there's a need to field verify. So I would just ask if the board could, condition this application to require the engineer to field verify those uncertain elevations prior to any work being started, and that's all.
Okay, we'll get comments and questions from board members first. Chris, do you, on wording here, do you want us to condition only uncertain elevations, or would it be safer for us to say all elevations?
Just those elevations between, up to the pump chamber.
Elevation up to pump chamber.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That is the only question or comment I had. Richard Romero, do you have questions or comments?
I do not.
Thank you. Susan Murray, do you have questions or comments?
I do not.
I'm just checking the chat really quick. Okay. Okay, and then if there's someone else here to speak on this, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Okay, seeing none. And if there's further discussion from my members, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move forward with finding a motion and conditions. Okay. So finding that there are no waivers and variances, but there is uncertainty that would affect the site. I move to approve 1 Knollview Drive with the condition that the engineer must verify elevations up to the pump chamber and report findings to the Board of Health staff to assure compliance, and that no such work or on other aspects of the work shown on the plan by S&K Engineering for 1 Knollview Drive can occur until the elevations are determined and compatible with the requirements of 310 CMR 15 Title 5. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All right, and now we're going to vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes, so the motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so we're going to go on to new business B, which is the 40B application for the residence at Hawthorne, 970 Tucker Road. All right, let's see. Is there someone who is here either as the applicant or representative of the applicant? Please unmute and speak on this if so. All right, I'm not seeing any action. Chris, can you please give us a summary on this?
Yes, thank you. So this is another affordable housing project that the town has an opportunity to comment to Mass Housing prior to Mass Housing consideration of a project eligibility letter. This site is much less complicated in terms of the Board of Health's, the Dartmouth Board of Health's public health jurisdiction by way of regulation and statute, and is much less complicated with public health concerns. The only concern that I have at this time with the project is with compliance with the 310 CMR 7 regulations, which are the air pollution regulations of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They are enforced by DEP and the local Board of Health with respects to certain sections, not broadly. We do share great authority with on the asbestos section in the 7 regs and dust. So if the Board of Health was to submit a letter to Mass Housing, it would merely be just a reminder letter that these regs apply. It's, you know, it'll come up in the Board of Appeals. It's not a situation that that I believe that the applicant can play a my way or the highway approach that sometimes becomes common with 40B applications, because these are existing state regulations. So we would be asking the Board of Appeals at that time, which would be after a PEL issued by Mass Housing, to just put, you know, reasonable conditions to assure compliance with 310 CMR 7 to prevent fugitive emissions, proper suspect asbestos building materials management, because that old convention center or function hall is going to get knocked down, and there's an expectation that there's suspect materials in there. And that's all.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, I'm going to open up to questions and comments from the members first. I think it makes sense, in my opinion, to especially for consistency, that we would write this letter to Mass Housing or direct our agents to do so. And you know, certainly the air pollution makes sense to me to remind them of those concerns. Chris, from us today, if we decide this as a board, would you need a formal motion or just understanding that we would wish you to move forward with that again, if that is the case?
It could be in either manner, because it doesn't erode the applicant's need for compliance. You know, that is strict. So it's, you know, I don't, you know, if the board wants to have a formal vote, as they did with the last 40B, it would be just providing consistency with how the Board of Health comments under this board.
Great, thank you. Okay, Agent or Member Romero, do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think it's important that we stay consistent with our recent findings toward, you know, air pollution and the such. So, yeah.
Thank you. Susan Murray, do you have questions or comments?
I agree that consistency is important.
Okay, and then is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this from the member of the public? Please go ahead and raise your hand and I'll recognize you. All right, I'm not seeing any action. So unless there's further discussion, I have a tentative finding and motion for this one. So finding that the board wishes to stay consistent with previous sites like this, that this is less complicated, but there is concerns with air pollution regulations. I move to direct the Board of Health staff to write a letter to Mass Housing Authority to remind them or to let them know of our concerns. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. All right, now we'll vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes. So the motion passes. Thank you. All right. The next item is the minutes of April 9th, or excuse me, section 2, item C, minutes of April 9th, 2025. I did not have any issues with these minutes. Were there any questions or issues from any other members with the minutes? Richard Romero, I'll let you go first.
No questions or comments.
Okay, Susan Murray, how about you?
No questions or comments.
Great. So then I move to accept the minutes of the Dartmouth Board of Health for April 9th, 2025 as written. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
All right, and then we'll vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes, so the motion passes. Excellent. All right. Section 2, new business, item D, Board of Health meeting schedule for June, July, and August 2025. So Chris, can you, maybe it would be best to ask you first what weeks it might make sense to aim for, and then we'll pick times and days from there.
Yes, so I'm just trying to jump into a calendar real quick, bigger
Sure.
calendar, just to see how things will lay out. Today is the 7th. Typically we try to meet every 28 days. So if we were to meet on Well, we're not gonna meet on, well, if we could meet on June 4th. If, the 3rd or the 4th, but, well, the problem with the 3rd is that's town meeting and within the town's charter, no board can, meet on the day of town meeting, so we could meet on, if we could meet on June 2nd or June 4th. That would keep us, and we could even meet on the 5th, and that would put us 29 days out.
The second looks good for me.
I
Could
could do
do-
the second at 4. Susan Murray, how does, do you need another second for your calendar? It looks like it's scrolling.
I could do the second.
Does the 4 o'clock time slot work for folks?
I would prefer a little later.
A little later, what time would you prefer?
Well, I have another meeting that goes until 4, so even
Oh,
starting
okay.
at 4:30 would be helpful.
Sure, that works for me. Richard Romero, does that work for you?
Yes.
All right, so then Monday, June 2nd at 4:30. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's June. Okay, so then you want 28 days after that, Chris, that week?
Yep.
Okay.
So that would be the 30th.
Okay, and then if I'm understanding, could we do a different day that week theoretically, or would it have to be either the 30th or before, based on usually how turnaround time works?
Well, it could be the 1st or the 2nd. That would still keep us within the 30-day window.
Cool.
Timeframes.
Okay, sounds good. Does anyone have a preference on Monday the 30th, Tuesday the 1st, or Wednesday the 2nd? I have some flexibility. Afternoons for me are usually easiest.
Same. Any of those days is fine, except for the first.
Not the first, okay.
Noon to 1 o'clock. I'm not available, but any other times is fine.
Okay. Susan Marie, do you have any preference or?
In the summers, Tuesday is a difficult day for me. So
Sure, let's roll
Monday or
Tuesday out
Wednesday.
then. Yeah. How about, does Monday work? Monday at either 4 or 4:30?
where I have a standing meeting that
You have a standing
ends
meeting.
at-
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
So
That's good to
4:30
know.
works.
Sure, okay, so Monday, Monday, June 30th at 4:30 for the next meeting, okay? Or one after that. Okay. And then, all right, so 4 weeks from then. The week of July 28th, is that what you have too, Chris? Chris is on mute. That's maybe he's settling in his calendar.
Yep. So the only problem for me is I do like keeping the days consistent, but I think I've got a conflict on the 28th.
Okay.
That's
So we, out of curiosity, what a Wednesday, the 30th of July, is that a possibility for the other members?
I have to check one more calendar.
Okay. Richard Romero, theoretically, could Wednesday the 30th work for you if it works for Susan Marie? Yeah.
Yes, I have nothing on there right now.
Okay.
So this is July 30th, right?
Correct. Mhm.
That could work for me.
Wednesday the 30th at 4:30?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, and then Chris, do you want us to pick one more for August, or even anyone? Because I mean, I should be able to know my summer schedule at this point, but I also I'm not sure how others are. Do we want to pick one more for the end of August, or no?
If if the members are able, I think it's great when we can have a long term schedule. 3 to 4 months is always best.
Sure. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, we're looking at, I'm seeing Monday, the 25th or Wednesday, the 27th of August.
The 27th works fine for me.
Okay. How about you, Susan Marie? Give you a minute.
The 27th does look like it works.
Okay, so Wednesday, August 27th at 4:30?
Sounds good to me.
Yes.
Okay. So then we'll pause there for now, and that gives us the summer. Great. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Chris, you're okay with us choosing that amount? I mean, I probably would want to pause before we get into the fall, just because I don't know that far out yet. Does that work for you, Chris?
Yes, and yeah, and definitely, historically when we've set out that far in advance, we've always kind of held on August because just so much uncertainty as you get into the fall.
For sure. Excellent. All right. So then we are going to move on to new business item E, which is the order of betterment assessment for property identified on plat 36, lot 30 at 1060 Old Fall River Road to be signed by the board. Is there an applicant or a representative here to speak on this?
There should
Chris,
not
would you
be.
like to? No, there should not be. Okay. Could you give us a summary, please, Chris?
Yes. So the board approved an initial betterment assessment for 1060 Old Fall River Road several months ago. Subsequently, the board members came in, signed the document, which got recorded at the Bristol County Registry of Deeds. That was an initial lien hold on the property to begin the process so that the homeowner could utilize funds that would get paid back upon finalization of the betterment process. And finalization of the betterment process is that following that document getting recorded at the Registry of Deeds, there's a contract that is acceptable to both the contractor and the homeowner. They present that to us. The work begins. The system is installed. A certificate of compliance is issued, and a final bill is presented to the board, accepted by both the contractor and the homeowner. So that has happened, and now we have the final amount. So we need to record a final betterment assessment against the property. It's kind of like a loan closing and a partial release at the same time. So this amount that will get recorded will be what is paid back by the applicant up to 20 years through their tax bill, their quarterly tax bills. So we would need the board members to approve this, and then following that approval, to come into the office to sign the document that gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds. And that's all.
Great. Okay, we'll open up to questions and comments. I don't think I have any. I believe I see betterments. It's it's part of it is a formality, but there's no reason that we would not vote to do this, because betterments, in their nature are for the benefit of public health, and they help people achieve that. So I don't see why we wouldn't vote for this. Richard Romero, do you have questions or comments?
No, I agree with you.
Susan Murray, do you have questions or comments?
Just making sure that there wasn't anything that happened that was unsuspected between the first agreement and this, Chris?
Nothing catastrophic. Sometimes there might be a small discrepancy in the amount of sand, when we get into some big overruns or if we get into discourse, but this was a really smooth installation.
Thank you. That's it.
Excellent. Okay, I'll open up. If there's anyone else here to speak on this, please raise your hand and I'll recognize you. All right, seeing none. If there's any other discussion, otherwise I'll, again, I try and take a lot of notes so that way we're ready for this. So I'll move forward with this. Finding that the amount to get recorded is the final amount and that there was nothing catastrophic that happened to change the amounts, I move to approve the order of betterment assessment for 1060 Old Fall River Road. Can I get a second?
I'll second the motion.
Excellent. And we'll vote. Richard O'Meara, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes, so the motion passes. Chris, will one of your staff or you let us know when it'll be ready for us to sign, or do you have an estimate when we need to come in?
The document is all set to come in and sign.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to section 2, new business, item F, which is operational policies. Chris, I think you're probably the best one to jump to first on this. Can you give us a summary? Let us know what we're looking at, please.
Sure, thank you. So this is an annual agenda item that we ask for the board to allow staff to streamline services and not impact the board with day-to-day operations. So there are a number of permit applications that, permits that we issue. And, rather than bog down the board's agenda with, hundreds upon hundreds of applications, in the past, the board has authorized us to issue those permits that are not described to the board specifically. So in other words, an animal permit, a new animal permit, the language in the board's regulations specifically names the board of health as issuing that, not staff. Renewals can be issued by staff, but we have other permits such as permits, mobile food permits, restaurant permits, tanning salons, semi-public pools, public pools. The list goes on and on. So what we ask is, for the board to consider allowing us, the staff, to issue those permit applications, so long as that they're complete and not seeking any sort of special consideration. If we had a situation where there was certainly a lot of disagreement, that might be a solution, would be to forward to the board for a decision. Subtype B, which is spending. This is always a customary. This would name one board member to come in to sign for an amount of $400 or more, rather than having to lay that on the agenda and have the board vote to approve it. But the Board of Health can also, where we have known and expected year-to-year expenses, and I have listed that in the board's agenda, and those are have been ongoing. We certainly have tweaked them over time, but as long as the board votes to authorize spending as I've itemized, then the board wouldn't need a signatory so long as we were up to that amount that I've listed. And then the last being other day-to-day functions and expected tasks, such as, and I'm just trying to be brief, take enforcement actions. It's difficult because sometimes enforcement actions, if we were to talk about a potential enforcement action, we would have to talk about it in open session unless it met the strict limitations of executive session. So having staff being able to respond and also respond quickly. We are required by the housing code to respond to violations in a certain time frame. And also in some instances, we have to file, whether it's in the district court, the housing court, and sometimes with more egregious situations, and rarely work with town council to file in the superior court through town council and with the board's interest. But that's always under the strict guidance of town council. And that's pretty much it summarized. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Chris, let me just help me to understand. Would you be looking for us as a board to make a motion to I'm trying to even think how to word this, to approve the operational policies as they're laid out? What would you ask for us?
If the board was, in agreement on these policies, then yes, I think that would be best, so that there's no uncertainty as to what the board's intentions are or were, should we find ourselves in the future and someone asking.
Okay, it would be a motion. Okay, and then would there be a separate motion to name one member to come and sign again the bills that were those that you named in excess of 400 that needed a little bit quicker action. You need a motion to name said member.
That is correct if a member wants to volunteer. If they don't, we can just put, those instances before the board. So.
Sure. What's typically the time frame that you in the past that you've seen it, like that's to come in and sign within 24 hours, within 2 days? What is it usually?
So that can be as needed. So if, like, let's say we had a bill here and, there's no, if you want to just hurry up and process, whether it was 2 days or 7 days or 8 days, calendar days, it would just be a matter of us processing, and also not running late, if there was interest charges on a bill.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I certainly am happy to do that. I was asking about the time frame just on the chance that it was, I don't know, you needed it within an hour or something, but certainly within a day or a couple of days, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to come in and sign for them. And just speaking my opinion, I know that you and I have talked in the past about a lot of the costs, so I certainly don't have any issues as a board member with approving the operational policies. All right, so now I'm going to open to my members first. So Richard Romero, do you have questions or comments, thoughts?
No, I have no comments or questions, but thanks.
Yeah. Susan Murray, do you have questions or comments?
I just, being new to the board, just making sure that, I'm fine with the permits that you normally do, but if there is some sort of conflict, that we do have the opportunity to see those. And that there's a chance for, if someone is in opposition for your determination, that they're able to present that to the board on the permits.
So yes, if like let's say someone was denied, there are appeal provisions as well, but sometimes and I can't think of anything where we've really had a sometimes someone comes in and says I want a mobile food permit tomorrow, and it's Thursday afternoon and we're all booked out. Well, that's not a that in a way that is a regulatory, because that's a 30-day and there's nothing we can do. But if there's a disagreement on something, just like that general permit, the full compliance with the condition for Knollwood, that's an example of forwarding something to the board for their for the board's engagement. And on enforcement, there are terms where if we do take action, we have to notify. So quite often the board members receive emails individually of, if we took a housing code order, then you will get a copy of that within 24 hours.
And then I guess my only other question, just being new to the board, and since we're talking about this, if when one of those notices where you did take action, is there an opportunity for that to come before the board? If it does continue to be a problem, would that come before the board?
So that it's going to depend upon the situation. So for example, like a housing code, we have to specify the right of appeal, and then the applicant is burdened by the provisions of the state's regulations. And what I mean by that is they have a very limited time period to appeal to the board for the board's consideration. to review the matter and say whether or not they agree that a violation exists. Or if, let's say we did a housing inspection and didn't find any violation, the occupant can appeal to the board and say, I disagree, I think there is a violation, and they can appeal that as well. So yeah, there's always, things will, the day-to-day, the routine happens through the inspectors. If something rises to a level, it's gonna, come to me. And then, at that point, if there's further discourse, in some cases it might be, you gotta, this is it and why. Sometimes we're engaging with DEP. There's so many different permits and so many different codes that we deal with. It's really hard for me to try to consolidate this into a really concise answer. But yeah, we always reserve the right to double check ourselves and, check with the chair about, do you want this on the meeting or not? And when it comes to enforcement, it's very prescriptive enforcement. Sorry if that's not specific enough, but it's just a lot of codes and a lot of different avenues in each of the codes.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if this helps too. I'll just kind of speak on my experience as well. So my background is in septic systems and wastewater. And so, the animal, everything is certainly interesting to me, but that's just where I find myself to be the most useful. So I don't think it's not in this packet, but I know in past years, and I imagine it would come at some point, or we could revisit it. There's a summary that says what the policies are of the Board of Health concerning things related to septic, and so all that is to say is, I would probably lean toward commenting on that because I'm just more familiar with it. So I would imagine that if there's an area of expertise that you're either most interested in or are most familiar with, that we could revisit it, or we could make sure that it's outlined more clearly if that's something maybe you want to weigh in on. Just because I understand Chris and his staff want to do their job and save us time, so that way we don't see literally everything that comes into the office. But I guess, finding that kind of that middle ground. It is my understanding that we can, we can revisit policies in the future, right, Chris? Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that help at all? Is there a certain area that you are most interested in that maybe there could be some side research to make sure that it's in line with I guess what you're thinking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not that I have a particular agenda and I'm thinking of one particular thing. It's just I feel, as a board member, like bringing community perspective, especially to situations that are more contentious, is one of the things we're meant to do. So just making sure there's, and this is, I'm sure these procedures are in place already, being new, but just making sure there is like that due diligence for people that question a decision either way.
Madam Chair, may I?
Please.
So I can give a really good example, and just how sometimes our sounding board, no pun intended, is not the Board of Health. If we're, and there's no disrespect by that. The Board of Health is the administrator of many state regulations. So, one of the things that we often will get from people is, well, I went to this town and you're the only town requiring it. I don't like to have that conversation, because I don't want to talk about what another town is not doing. I find that would be disrespectful to that town. If this is about a state regulation, there should never be 351 different interpretations. There should only be one interpretation. So when there is a question about an interpretation of a regulation that might have a little bit of discretion or uncertainty in it, we'll call, whether it's DPH for, let's say, camp regulations or pool regulation. I can think back to a hot tub, a semi-public spa, AKA hot tub. where there was a lot of disagreement on that, and getting the opinion of DPH and contacting the head of community sanitation on that for his final opinion, and he agreed, and that's unfortunately that hot tub got filled in. Or in the case of some matters, bouncing it off of DEP, whether it's with something from asbestos all the way to septic, on those regulations that we share with them. And there's a situation I can think of where there was some uncertainty, and I reached out to the regional director of the Southeast region of DEP to ask for guidance. They had just hired a new deputy regional director for the Title V section, and the response that deputy regional director provided in writing was, fortunately, it was mirroring. I'm afraid of people that are always right, and I always, if there's uncertainty, we're happy to explore that, especially when it comes to state regulations with the state, because ideally there should only be one interpretation from the primary promulgator, which would, in those instances, DPH or DEP. I don't know if that helps.
Yes.
Great. I certainly, I don't mind revisiting operational policies if in the future we need to. I'll say as a board member, I'm a big fan of efficiency, but I'm here for the ride, so if we need to discuss it as a board, I'm happy to put in the time. Just again, voicing that because I know that different boards have different priorities, and sometimes folks' time is very valuable and they just want to get through. So again, we can certainly revisit that. Are there any other questions or discussion items either from Richard Romero or Susan Murray at this time?
No.
No.
Chris, do I? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Good. Okay, thank you. Chris, do I need to open it up to anyone else because this is an operational policy, or is it okay to just open it up to members' questions and comments?
I think that it's an internal decision-making process myself. But...
Okay, internal. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So then, all right. So then we'll move forward. So finding that that this streamlines the process without interrupting or using the board's meeting time. I move to approve the operational policies and to name Emily Michelle Olmsted as the board signatory for bills if needed for permit applications, issuance and renewals, spending, and other day-to-day functions and expected tasks. Can I get a second?
I second the motion.
Great. Now we'll vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes, so the motion passes. Okay, so now we are going into section 3, old business. All right, so we've got item A, which is continued proposed well regulations, discussion with board on proposal from prior board decision to revise. And before I hand this over to you, Chris, I just want to make sure this is a discussion and not a hearing, correct? So this is also, it is okay if this is kept internally with the members as far as discussion, correct?
Yes, this is an old business item, and this is to update the board on unfinished business from the prior board terms.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you want to speak on the well regulations, please?
Sure. So our existing well regulations are extremely old and in need of update. A number of years ago, staff was tasked by the board to update those regulations. To essentially, it was beginning from scratch and applying a lot of situations and bouncing ideas off of industry professionals as well as officials at DEP and the Public Drinking Water Supply section. And we have a final set of regulations. Because of the board's legislative abilities to create local regulations, there is a provision in there, whereas when a local regulation has a direct impact on agriculture, and that town has a agricultural commission, 60 days notice has to be provided to the Ag Commission. So notice was provided in excess of 60 days ago to the Ag Commission. We have not received any notice back that I'm aware of. These regulations at this time would be able to move forward to a hearing at a subsequent meeting of the board if there isn't disagreement on such by the members. The one item that, when we last discussed these regulations, there was one item that was where there was some uncertainty, and that is in regards to those compounds that are called forever compounds, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are compounds that have been in use for over 50 years, that have modernized many materials from clothing to packaging. We are exposed to these forever compounds daily. There are some industry trends to try to remove them, but at this point in time, I am unfamiliar with any government bans on those from being utilized. So the regs as they currently stand in the format that was presented to the Ag Commission have a testing requirement for these forever compounds. These regs could advance to a hearing and the board could vote to, however, which could include either keeping that in there or removing that section. The reason why the initial cut of these regulations did not include it was there was some uncertainty about the treatment options when this endeavor first began to rewrite these regulations. And from my understanding in conversations with staff at Mass DEP is that these treatment systems now, they're called point of entry treatment systems, POET systems, are very effective at removing these forever compounds. So that's why it was brought back. Do I think we'll encounter this anthropogenic, this man-made contaminant in drinking water wells? Yes. You test enough wells, we're going to get it. The contaminant level is down to the parts per trillion. Most contaminants that we're regulated in drinking water are to parts per million, parts per billion. I believe these forever compounds are the only compounds that are regulated to parts per trillion. And it's a very mobile contaminant. Some contaminants like certain metals, lead and arsenic, are insoluble, which means they just kind of sit mostly where they were dumped or released. Other contaminants are like essentially like a race car or a rocket in the environment, and the speed of it depending upon a number of conditions. Chlorinated solvents and forever compounds are examples of that. So being that we're looking for this now in the parts per trillion, and it's so mobile, and it's been in use for so long, and it's in our day-to-day lives, many homes are probably discharging this through their wastewater into their on-site septic systems. There are some reported health concerns with these compounds, and why there's becoming a lot of focus with the EPA and DEP on it. We're going to find it. We're going to get someone that's going to be mad because it was found. What I'm concerned about is the person that buys that spec house and comes into us, a few years later and says, why didn't you make this developer test my well? And my kids have been drinking this water. The test is not as much money as it was when it first came out. Yes, we're asking the public to spend money. But again, when you're asking the public to spend money to protect public health, how do you put a price on health? So, you know, that was still a little bit of uncertainty under the old board before the April elections, whether this would, you know, remain. It's there. We don't have to re-notify Ag Commission if the board was to rescind that section in the hearing. But I just wanted to mention all of this, you know, at this point in time, if the board wants to advance this to a hearing. Thank you.
Great. All right, we'll open up discussion among members. I'll go ahead and speak first. So I'll say I'm certainly a fan of moving the well regulations forward. Just in general, I think it's drinking water is extremely important, and I think these are pretty thorough regulations. And Chris, a lot of this is really going to affect new wells, so it's not as if we're burdening people. We're not. It's not like to go out, you know, for everybody's well and make sure that they're okay. That we're talking about new wells, so we're hitting it realistically. As far as the PFAS, I've absolutely gone back and forth. My thoughts are this. What's tricky is, you know, the parts per trillion, as Chris mentioned, you know, you worry about contamination during sampling, but as Chris has said, and as my understanding too, is it's amazing how much the science is developing. So, you know, the cost of a test for PFAS is cheaper. The treatment system is you know, a more reasonable price. And so, again, I go back and forth with whether we include PFAS, but I do think I am a fan of putting it in there. And then, and Chris, this is a question for you. So if let's say that we as a board decide we do want the forever compound section in there, and we have a public hearing, and let's say theoretically in that public hearing someone comes forward and presents an argument that dissuades us, the public hearing, we could still remove such section. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I think I'm a fan of moving forward with them in, and then you know, to be more protective, and you know, that's the most informed we can do. Oh, and sorry, this is the last thing, because I remember past discussions with this as well. From what my findings, because the forever compounds really are quite ubiquitous, drinking water is one of the believed to be largest sources of it for human consumption. So that was kind of a persuader for me. It's not just, even though they are everywhere, drinking water is a big source for it. So so those are my thoughts. We'll open it up. Richard Romero, we'll go to you next.
Sure. So this, just to emphasize that this is just for new builds, correct?
That is correct. We are not requiring an investigation or a testing regime for existing wells. We are not doing that.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Susan Marie.
So my concern with this is that the state doesn't have, so with the PFAS, it's unsettled at the state level, especially when you're talking about agriculture. I'm sure you're well aware what happened to farmers in Maine when action was taken in advance of sort of really setting protections in place for farmers. And I'm not in any way denying how serious PFAS is. It is incredibly serious chemical. I just worry that preceding having set state laws in place that, one, protect farmers from lawsuits if they are irrigating with water that is contaminated with PFAS, and lawsuits that happen from people consuming that produce, that we don't have some sort of, you know, you're talking about digging a well and then finding PFAS and then the entire farm losing its business because because of that, because we don't have protections in place yet. That is my worry, is that preceding those protections, which are currently going through the State House, there is a bill that is up in this. I mean, it came up in the last session as well and didn't make it through, but will hopefully make it through this session that would put those protections in place. My preference would be, I mean, I'm not as familiar because I am new. I'm not as familiar with the new wet well regulations, but I do have some concerns with including the PFAS before there are protections in place statewide, particularly for farmers.
Yeah, I think that's valuable perspective. Do you have and I know you don't, I'm assuming you don't work for the state, you don't represent them. What was the last that you heard? So what sort of timeline have they guessed for that? Can you provide any insight on that?
For the bill?
Yeah, because in my understanding, it's potentially the state is on the cusp of introducing these for drinking water. So
Well,
I know it's complicated. It's a regulation, so
yeah, I don't think so let me quickly look up. I don't think it's been even scheduled for a hearing yet.
okay.
So we're in the first year of a 2-year state session at the State House. There are a couple PFAS bills. I in general am looking at the one that protects farmers.
Mhm.
Trying to pull that up really quickly. An act protecting our soil and farms from PFAS contamination, H109 S56. It's been referred to the Joint Committee on Ag. It has not been scheduled for hearings yet. It will have a hearing this year, probably this
Okay.
summer. But again, it's a 2-year session. So it takes that full 2 years to know if it actually passes as a bill. And it did not pass the last session.
Got it. So then, if I'm understanding you correctly and your concerns, which of course are valid, you would prefer that if we as a board move forward with the well regulations, we remove the PFAS part just because of that uncertainty at this time.
I mean, that's really, I'm sure as you all know, it's really complicated, but
Yeah.
I mean, they had the best intentions in Maine.
Yeah.
And a lot of farmers lost their livelihoods. And there was they're trying to put in ways to either make those farmers whole or reclaim those sites.
Mhm.
It's that unforeseen piece. But I
Yeah.
also understand that the Board of Health is trying to protect the health of people, but Chris, and because I've been following the bills on, particularly for farmers, but I don't think any of the PFAS bills made it out last time. What are the state regulations concerning PFAS at the moment? Because to me, they seem unsettled.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of unsettlement, as you know, between the EPA and DEP, I believe, on the calculation for the threshold. EPA may be changing away from the sum of 6, if my memory is correct. In other words, the maximum contaminant level is based on the sum of 6 at this time of the 6 compounds. This is what DEP coins as an emerging contaminant. It's front and center on their radar. And I don't think it's going to leave their immediacy. I do know that there have been, there was a bill, I think, in the last session or the session before, maybe both, when we were first entertaining these regs to dive into them. There was a bill that was filed that was going to essentially set up a testing regime as a state requirement, that it had the look and feel test of the Title V inspection process. And to me, when I read the bill, even though it didn't mention PFAS, to me it had PFAS all over it. Yeah, you know, this is a tough one, and I'm unfamiliar. And what we could do is we could take a look at other towns and just kind of query if DEP is aware of any towns that have regulated this through a local board of health. I haven't heard of any, but it doesn't mean that there isn't. It's a tough. This is a tough one because we are going to get that person one day that's going to test their well and walk through this door, but I know we're going to find it. And ideally, it would be nice if we were regulating this beginning on the front end and not on the back end.
I just worry that, we don't know what is on that other side. And are we actually ready as a town to face the consequences of that? Are we prepared for the unknown, possibly putting a lot of people out of business? Do we feel comfortable that we'll identify a problem and we can control it and make sure that the water is safe? Or is it going to open up more questions that we can't actually address, or open up more issues that we can't actually address yet?
So
are we ready as a town?
Yeah, so so that's why our regulations are not regulations that are focused on existing wells. No community of any size has that ability to focus on existing wells. This is only on new well installations where they would be required to test. And at that point, if there was a hit, then the homeowner has to address that. The property owner has to address that issue. Knowing how difficult it is to try to prove things in bedrock wells, and knowing of an investigation that Mass DEP is doing in a nearby town, it really is hit and miss. And I spoke to the investigator at the Southeast region and I said, have you developed a pattern yet? Is it old wells, new wells? And it's hit and miss. There's no pattern that they can point to yet. So if something let's just say you had a subdivision and they put in a well and you got sum of 6 at 30 parts per trillion, and let's just say 3 out of the 6 had exceedances. All of those individual exceedances are reportable conditions to Mass DEP, whereas the owner of the property is bound to report that to DEP. What DEP is then charged with how that gets managed. Would they open up an investigation or just deal with that with the respective owners? That is DEP's sole authority.
Right, but what would happen? Like, could the person not use that well, not live in that house?
So
are we sure that the treatment is that, on the farming side, what we've been told is there is no remediation that is acceptable yet.
So we know on the drinking water side that these POET systems, because DEP has been putting them in throughout Massachusetts, and let me just kind of back up a little bit. A number of years ago, under the Baker administration, grants were offered to communities that predominantly relied upon private drinking water wells. and that the grants were provided to test for these forever compounds. And consequently, they had a lot of hits for forever compounds. And I know in a nearby community that was eligible for these grants, they have gone and installed these POET systems. I also know that in a public water supply, and public water supply sounds a little bit narrowing. And what I mean by that is public water supplies are not always operated by a city or a town. In some cases, you can have a public water supply that is privately operated but serves the public. And those have been testing as well as part of the 310, 22 or 20 regs. I forget which one it is. And they've been getting hits on those, and they've been having to install systems, and those systems, even at imminent hazard levels. So there's two types of exceedances. There's the first, once you cross that, I think it's 20 parts per trillion, that's an exceedance. But then if the level gets high enough, then it becomes an imminent hazard. So in other words, what the imminent hazard is, it's imminently threatened to you. It's so high. And I know of one in an adjoining community, a public water supply, that had to put in a system, and it brought those levels down well under the standard. And that water is now able to be used again.
So let me just, because I actually think it's great that you're coming from that farm perspective. That's one I hadn't even considered, because when I was kind of thinking about it and I go worst case scenario, I think, okay, I have a house, I need to drill a new well, and then there's a hit. So then the kind of worst case scenario for a homeowner, if that were true, again, with specifically a new well, is that I would then have to have one of these POET systems. And Chris, you estimated when you had looked into the POET systems, there were maybe about $10,000, right? And usually new wells are with new construction, correct?
Most often, occasionally we still get a situation or two where a well either goes dry or the shaft can collapse. So we still have that unfortunate, but years ago when we had a drought back in the 90s, early 2000s, yeah, we would have 2-3 people, in a drought season needing to replace a well. But we've seemed to have shed ourselves of all those shallow dug wells by and large, and now mostly drilled wells.
Okay. And then, Chris, remind me the estimated cost you had for a POET system to treat the water in a worst case scenario where someone had this on their new well. What was the estimate on that?
I thought it was around 10, but it's been a number of months now since I had that discussion. I would really, before I commit hard to that number, I'd want to go back with someone that's quite familiar with it. And
I understand.
For the next meeting, if the board desires.
Okay. So we won't hold you to that number, but then theoretically, that would be like again a worst case scenario. And I'm money is obviously an object, but if it's more likely that it's going to be new wells with new construction, those usually come with greater costs. So $10,000 versus the cost of a new house, I would think would be maybe more manageable. But let's talk about from the farming perspective. Maybe would it be possible for you to research, because let's say, again, worst case scenario, I'm already an existing farmer on a farm that is my business, and I have to drill a new well to water my crops. Is that POET system in a worst case scenario where I have a hit, is that going to be more costly? I wonder if the cost is based on the amount of water that you have to draw out. I don't know, would that be helpful perspective for you, Susan Marie? Because I hadn't even thought of, we wouldn't want to put anyone out of business or open them up to lawsuits in trying to do something good. Would that be helpful information for you? I mean, I'm kind of curious on it now too. Again, the cost of the POET system and how that might change based on, I suppose, the amount of water that you would draw out, or what sort of variables there are for that.
Yeah,
Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, $10,000 would be for a commercial farmer that isn't independently wealthy. $10,000 would be kind of untenable unless a grant was available.
Mhm.
Most likely, if you're digging a well, you're getting grant money to dig that well, either through the USDA, the NRCS gives out, does cost share on wells. I mean, I've dug wells around Dartmouth, based on at different farms. A lot of farms don't have good access to water, so it is something that happens pretty regularly.
Okay,
And all the wells I've had, I had cost share on it. Mostly I've gotten them from, there was a drought, and so that opened up USDA money to get a cost share. And so like adding this in, the USDA, the grants that we have do not cover anything like this.
okay,
There's possibly one Mass Department of Ag grant that might cover it, but it doesn't, they have not, the Mass Department of Agriculture has not touched PFAS yet.
Hmm,
I think they're watching it, but they haven't, they're very quiet on it.
got it.
And so you got to
Okay.
think and like this is the, I mean, this is the juggling act, right? So farms use it to irrigate their fields, and they use it to wash vegetables. They use it to water their animals. So in which case, like if it is, it's obviously we want to protect the community. You don't, no farmer wants to serve up a plate of carrots with a side of PFAS. I mean, nobody wants to do that. Are we ready for the consequences? Are we the first in the state? Are we ready for the consequences? We don't know what they are yet. That's my concern.
No, I think that makes sense.
Good
So I
point.
think in the interest of time, maybe I'll kind of suggest an idea. And a real quick question, Chris. This is not a motion, right? This is a discussion, right? Correct. Okay. So then what about this? It sounds to me like we as members are not ready to move forward with this as far as making it a public hearing. So in between now and the next meeting, I would say if it's possible, Chris, for you and your staff to query other towns regulating PFAS, for us as members to your level of concern to go in and try and research whatever we can, again, specifically on PFAS, which two, I mean, maybe just give me a visual thumbs up. The PFAS is the sticking point with the well regulations, right? We're not concerned about the other, not that we're not concerned, but we are okay with the other regs as they're written. It's just PFAS that we, as a board, need to make sure we're on the same page about, right? Yes. Okay. I think so. Okay. So then, does that sound okay to my other members? In between now and next meeting, go forward, see other research specifically on PFAS and any questions we want answered, and then hopefully at the next meeting we can decide to how we want to move forward with this. Does that sound okay to folks? Yes. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so we don't need an action on this. So we'll go forward onto section 3, old business, which is item B, the continued proposed tobacco regulations. And again, this is a discussion, so it's internal. Okay. Chris, can you please give us a summary on this?
Sure. So again, as mentioned in the first old business item, this is a endeavor on staff from the former boards prior to the April election. We have a draft regulation at this time that's still working internally, which is not a public document. And it needs to, that draft needs to finalize with town council. So before, furthering, town council's expenses on that, I just wanted to circle back with the new board and make sure that this current board still wishes to modernize our tobacco regulations.
Chris, a question, because I believe well, I have been on the board the longest. My understanding with this, the draft regulations is that really they are founded in education to vendors and making sure that they, understand already existing rules in the state, and again, just educating the people selling tobacco. Is that a correct summary, or is there anything else to note about them because we don't have them in our packet?
Yeah, that's, just in brief, it really is trying to really bring a lot of emphasis on, training, with the retailer, emphasizing training, exercising perhaps some controls to assure that these products are being sold to people of the correct age and not putting young clerks in a position where they feel funny about, asking for a license. I've been in some stores where it says everybody needs to show a license to purchase tobacco. Everyone needs to show a license regardless of age to purchase alcohol. We know that a lot of our alcohol establishments are where tobacco is sold, and the ABCC, the Alcohol Beverage Commission of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they take it very seriously about underage sales. And, it seems like the sale of alcohol goes off better than, sometimes with tobacco. So, if it's the same age, I would expect that there shouldn't be any difference in compliance. So, let's just, really try to focus on that compliance aspect of it. And that's, what these regs will do if they're modernized. There will be some additional modernization to them, perhaps with hemp industry. There's a lot of hemp products that are coming around that, there's a lot of questions about those. So, we did focus on these hemp type cigarettes. You look at some of these hemp cigarettes and the way they package them, the red triangle is upside down, but at a quick glance, it looks a lot like a Marlboro. Yeah, it's great that, they say, 21 plus, but, if the regulations that exist today of the local board predate that of the hemp industry, that's another example of the need for modernization. So, if the board wishes us to continue on this, it wouldn't require a vote. I would say if there was discourse with continuing on this, then I would just ask for a vote, just because, we're into it pretty far with town council, and unfortunately, because, it hasn't, closed out as quickly as the prior boards had wished, it's now before this board.
And sorry, Chris, you just said, so unless we are unanimous, you would like a vote on this formally? Is that, did I just hear you correctly?
If there was discourse by a member, then,
Yes,
the
okay, I
vote
got it.
would be, guidance and, justification as to where we go next.
Great, thank you. I'll say as a board member, I am in favor with moving them forward in the process. Again, we still have to go through the whole procedure and have a hearing and hear from that. But I guess when it comes to public health, I consider tobacco to be just one of the things that it's good to get ahead of, and certainly modernization of our regs makes sense. So I'm in favor of moving forward. So I'll open up to my other members. Richard or Meryl, we'll hear from you first. Thoughts, concerns, questions? How do you feel?
No, I also believe we should move forward with this. You had mentioned, Chris, not training, but compliance. Is there like a state level too that these retailers go through to be able to sell tobacco products, and they're like, or is this just more like town regulation, I guess.
It's by and large town. The only, there's FDA compliance checks. And there are DOR checks on the tax stamp. But I'm not aware of anything else on the DPH level. If a complaint is made to DPH about smoking in a workplace, you know, they call us and we say, we want you to go out there. So it's pretty much all on the local public health.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, like we can move forward on it.
Thank you. All right, Susan Murray, questions, thoughts, comments, where do you stand?
I'm good with moving forward with it.
Great. Thank you. All right, so it sounds like we as a board are in favor of moving forward with it. So Chris, please go ahead and put it through the next step in the process.
Yeah, thank you. And just so that the board is aware, what that'll be is just advising, you know, town council, and then just working, you know, the schedule of council and, you know, implementation schedules and that of this current board. So it'll be a few months is my expectation, you know, but my desire is I would really like to see this happen under this current board, so we don't have to revisit this conversation again. You know, having invested so much time and, you know, one board does not bind on the next.
Makes sense. Thank you. All right. Okay, and then we're going to go on to section 4, any item not known 48 hours in advance. And this information is, excuse me, this item is informational only and not for deliberations by the public body. Chris, do you have anything on this?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so it is 5:37 on Wednesday, May 7th, 2025, and I will move to adjourn the meeting of the Dartmouth Board of Health. Can I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All right, we'll vote. Richard Romero, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Susan Murray, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
And Emily Michelle Olmsted votes yes. The motion passes. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.